What's up guys, my name is Tetos and in this video I'm going to tell you how to play Rumble like Dyrus. Now of course, if you follow my guide series there is a combo section usually before I talk about the laning phase, and this is not the case here because Rumble doesn't really have any combos. Instead I'm going to be explaining his ultimate as well as the heat system, so stay tuned for that and let's jump right into the guide. Dyrus always runs teleport and flash on Rumble, and the reason for that is that you need the teleport to make some awesome TP plays to snowball mid lane and bottom lane, for example, if possible, and the flash is necessary because Rumble doesn't have an escape spell, so you need something to get away from ganks if you're playing top lane. Dyrus uses one of these 3 rune pages every game, and the first one is just a standard AP page against an AP lane. So if you are just starting out to play Rumble, you can also pick this one up because it has more defensive stats and that's just generally better if you don't know how to play a champion well. If you're against an AD lane though, you can pick up flat or scaling AP glyphs depending on if your focus is the early game or the late game. For Masteries, there's only one page Dyrus is using and it's 21.9 and 0. It's very standard AP page, nothing to say here really. All the trading Masters in the defense tree, additional health, AP Masters in the offense tree, nothing special. For skill order on Rumble, you always max R before Q, before E, before W. But at level 1, 2, 3, your first skill points depend on the enemy matchup. So if you're against a ranged matchup, you wouldn't go Q, W, E, but you would go E, Q, W first to have a safe CSing phase basically and just avoid the unnecessary early harass. For item builds, your standard start should be Doran's Shield, Health Potion or Warding Totem, but if you're against a very weak lane and you want to bully them harder, you can start with the Amplifying Tome and the Pot as well as the Warding Totem as well. Now for your core items, you definitely want to rush the Sork Shoes and the Haunting Guys every game almost, and the reason for that is because Rumble just scales off magic penetration very well. Other pickups or good pickups include Ryla's Crystal Scepter, Liandry's Torment, of course, the upgraded Haunting Guys. Then, of course, an Hourglass as well as an Abyssal Scepter, depending on the enemy team. Of course, you wouldn't pick up the Abyssal Scepter if there is no AP threat on the enemy team, but instead another item, for example, a Void Staff or maybe even a Death Cap. As you're playing Rumble, you have to be careful about ganks all the time, so you need to buy wards frequently, upgrade your Trinket if possible and if necessary. Just to ward more and avoid getting camped and feeding the enemy, of course. When the enemy team is stacking MR, you definitely want to pick up a Void Staff as your final item, or if you are against a squishy team, you want to get the Death Cap to maximize your DPS. Also, always get the Home Guard enchant because TP plays are just that much easier if you have Home Guard boots, and for the Elixir, of course, the Sorcery should be a primary choice, but only in the later stages of the game when you have your full build already pretty much. When playing Rumble, you definitely want to bully weak early lanes, but against strong early lanes you want to farm safely and wait for your power spikes, so buy wards to avoid getting ganked, of course, because you have no escape spell as mentioned previously. You want to abuse your level and item power spikes because the level 1, 2 and 3 you aren't really that strong, but the more levels you get and more ranks in Flamespitter and more magic penetration items you get, the stronger you become, and that's when you can start looking for kills and TP plays. Just the early mid-game team fights with your ultimate, which is very strong once you hit some power spikes, some item power spikes. So you want to TP bot lane or mid lane and try to snowball them, of course, to end the game earlier. You want to group for objectives because you aren't a split pusher and pressure your enemies with your ultimate. And the reason why you want to try to end games early before you fall off is because you definitely fall off in the later stage of the game, and the true late game carries definitely can affect a team fight and the late game better than a Rumble, unless you're ridiculously far ahead. And lastly, landing your ultimate is key in teamfights and just throughout the game, so you need to practice this. It's very hard and not like intuitive when you first do it, especially if you're using Smartcast. But a good thing, a good tip as always, is to wait for LICC to land your ult easier, or just use it to zone the enemy team. Before I go into the specifics, I want to give you a TLDR. First up, you can have between 0 and 100 heat. Using abilities builds up heat, 20 per ability usage. And there is the danger zone between 50 and 100 heat where your skills get additional bonuses, more damage or just more movement speed bonus or more shield values. In the danger zone, if you hit 100 heat, then you silence yourself for 6 seconds and you can't cast any spells. So, in some cases you want to stay in the danger zone and want to trade, but in other cases when your DPS skills are on cooldown, as in this one, you want to hit the danger zone on purpose to get the auto attack damage increase. However, notice how when you use your Flame Spitter at the last second to overheat, the cooldown is as long as the self-silence. So you definitely want to overheat in some scenarios when you want to do max DPS. For example, in this clip, where you can just wait out the cooldown for Flame Spitter, and as you silence yourself with Flame Spitter, you can still, for example, use Flame Spitter to do DPS, or if you use the E for the self-silence and hit 100 heat, you can still use the second charge of the E without a problem, as you can see here. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, increased auto attack damage means easier last hitting usually for Rumble, so you can push waves quicker when you hit the 100 heat marker and abuse that fact to just last hit easier and quicker. Of course, in 1v1s, you want to use your E before you hit the 100 heat, use the Flame Spitter at the same time, maximize the damage for those two spells, of course, because the Scrap Shield isn't really that worth it. Improve your auto attack damage by hitting 100 heat, and that's how you win trades against several champions, for example this Charan. The early game for Rumble might look different in a lot of games. For example, in this clip you can see a double jungle start, which only really happens in high elo, of course, but it makes sense. For example, if you're against a very strong early laner as Jarvan and the bottom lane takes their own camp, for example, you can help your jungler reach level 2, get level 2 yourself, get additional potions, hit the level 2 spike, and don't put yourself into danger, basically. Also, you can start Crux or just help little with the jungle there, then go to lane. You also can go to lane early and then manipulate the creep wave in a way that the enemy top laner, who might start at the jungle as well, or who might be late to lane, you can do this to basically freeze the wave and make the enemy lose more XP, while the enemy wave pushes in your favor, of course. Now, you can also choose to push very hard against weak early laners, such as Aurelia, for example. This is very good, for example, to clear the wave while harassing her, and if she decides to trade back, you will have the creep advantage there, so that's a very good thing you can do against various melee top laners. However, you should also be careful about CSing, because Flame Spitter can actually do not a lot of damage, but the auto attack to CS is definitely important to master, and you don't have that much AD, so you should be careful about last hitting perfectly, especially in the early game, to hit your power spikes earlier. Under pressure, however, against a ranged top laner such as Cannon, it can get pretty difficult and ugly as Rumble, especially in the early game. Later on you have your defensive stats anyway, and you just want to stay safe there, harass, or last it rather, with your E. Watch out about the danger zone, of course, shield incoming harass with the W whenever possible, but don't overextend and don't get caught by any jungle gangs, because of course we don't have an escape. So shielding the ranged harass is very important. At minute 3 you usually want to ward, which is very important, and also you can use an early pink ward to help throughout the laning phase if the enemy doesn't clear it. This might seem trivial, but it's very important, and if you don't do it, it can look something like this. For example, you get ganked, there is no way you can escape that, for example against an Jarvan Elise combo, and of course you might flash over a wall, escape for a while, but you will definitely get camped and ganked if you overextend as Rumble like that. When laning against a very weak early lane, you definitely want to harass them continuously and trade very aggressively, because, believe it or not, Rumble actually has kill pressure even without Ignite. For example, in this clip you can see a solo kill on the Hecarim, who overextends a bit too much and pays the price with his life, because actually with the E slow you can definitely catch up to enemies even though you don't really have any hard CC, and also the empowered auto attacks, they actually deal more damage than the enemy might expect, because some people just think, wow, once Rumble overheats he doesn't do any damage, but it's not really true, because once the Flame Spitter can still tick on while you're overheating, and you can still use your second charge for your E to chase down the people for a kill, as in this clip. So hopefully you will use this to your advantage. When teamfighting as Rumble, the Flame Spitter and ultimate damage is essential to win fights. For example, in crowded areas you definitely want to pick a fight, because the ultimate can zone people, but also if you have CC on your allies, they can just help you and make the enemy stay in the zone to get more damage. And the ultimate, if one stays in the zone for a long time, it really does a lot of damage. However, in an open area, as in this mid lane teamfight, it doesn't really work that easy, because the allies actually, I'm gonna spoil it for you, they will go down or use their CC on the assassins, but that means Rumble doesn't really have a target except for a tank, and even a decently placed ultimate doesn't do a lot because Kalista just hops out of it, Elise just doesn't walk into it, Thresh doesn't walk into it, only Jarvan stays in it pretty much, and the enemy team just cleans up the fight, and Rumble gets a return kill but doesn't really do much other than that, and it just shows that he didn't really have a big impact in that fight whatsoever. When trying to master Rumble, you definitely want to look at his skills first because they're easy to just press, but to land and to abuse them perfectly is way harder. So for example, on the turret you can definitely harass people with the E, but also with the Q, as in this clip, without taking turret aggro if you time it right. This is very difficult, however, though. The E is a little bit easier, but still, to hit it you definitely want to practice and don't take any turret aggro in return, as in this clip, which was done perfectly. Now the ultimate is a pretty tricky spell, and you will see throughout the next clips how you can use it. For example, in this one, it's placed very nicely on top of the enemy team, on 3 enemies actually, and it does a lot of damage, actually allows them to win this little team fight here. But it just shows that you can't just land it anywhere, and it's not easy to land, and the allies can definitely help you out with the CC to keep the enemies in the zone. In this clip, however, the ultimate wasn't really placed well because Morgana was dead anyway, so she wouldn't walk over it, but he should have cast it in this way to basically get at least more damage, or maybe even a kill on the Evelynn. Now, you can also use it just to zone the enemies. For example, when the tower goes down here, Lee Sin is a bad spot, and he also zones Kalista in this way, in this clip, which is just a very nicely placed ultimate. Let's talk about how to aim your ultimate correctly now and how to use it. If you're using normal cast, you want to press R, then left click, aim it, and another left click will cast it. If you're using smart cast, however, you can just press R, then aim it, and then another R. Now, you can also replace the second R with a left click as shown later, or as I will show later. And if you want to cancel your ultimate with smart cast on, you want to press right click after the first R, and if you have normal cast, you want to press right click even after the first R or after the first left click. So that will cancel it, and then you don't have a bad ultimate in case you aimed it incorrectly. A quick tip I can give you is that you should definitely practice to CS, because the weak early damage on Q and E definitely make it harder to last it on Rumble, as well as the low AD in general. Now, for diving enemies in solo queue, many people in lower elites especially don't like to dive, but if you want to do it, push out the wave correctly. If you're a level ahead, the enemy doesn't have his ultimate, it is even that much easier. You also want to ward in case the enemy comes, or just back off in case the enemy comes. But the Rumble ultimate works very well because people love to hide behind the turret, and it's a great spot to hit your ultimate well. Finally, I want to talk about teleport ganks, because they are a great tool to get your team ahead, and you definitely want to land your ultimate in a way that the enemies have to walk across it or just have to flash over it. It just allows you and your allies to get more confidence, because if they get kills, they get strong of course as well. Allows the snowball to get rolling, but it's not always that easy, because sometimes a teleport can really put you far behind, as in this clip. He doesn't really have the vision on the enemy team that much. He teleports on a gravity field laid out by Victor, gets bursted immediately, dies there by the last ignite tick or the smite, and it just snowballs in the enemy team's favor drastically. You can see how they all die basically, and the enemy team gets a huge gold lead because of this misplaced teleport. Before I end the video and have a little announcement for you guys, I want to show the game plan once more, because I kind of like putting it there at the end of the video after I've shown all the clips, because after seeing all the key factors, all the laning tips, all the tips about the heat system and stuff like that, it definitely makes more sense, and hopefully every bullet point is now clearer to you guys, and hopefully this guide was overall useful to most of you. Welcome to the end screen once again. You've made it. Congratulations. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, thanks for liking and sharing this video. On the right hand side you can see a link to the previous Play Like a Pro episode about how to play Draven like Freeze. Of course, down below there's a link to the playlist, which features every single episode I've made so far. And I want to tell you that I'll be on vacation the next week, so I won't be at home. I can't do an episode the next week, so you will have the next Play Like a Pro episode in 2 weeks. I hope you can deal with that and you're not upset or something. But I'm really putting a lot of time and effort into these videos, so that's why they can't be mass produced, and I can't put out like 5 videos per week or something like that. So yeah, that's that. As always, domo arigato for watching the videos I'm doing, and until next time, bye bye.